Welcome to Literary Libations with Librarians, and this time we are going to be sharing absolutely absorbing audiobooks. Those of us talking today love listening to our books as much as we love reading them. As we share, the books that we talk about will appear on your screen as long as the various formats that they are available in through the Monroe County Library System. And if you'd like to get your hands on any of those, there are several ways to go about doing that. The first way is to call your local branch of the Monroe County Library System and speak to the staff there, and they'll be more than happy to assist you. The next way, if you want to do it yourself, you can go into our online catalog, and that address is on your screen now. And that'll allow you to request physical versions, hardcover, paperbacks, etc. And if you're interested in a digital version, we have two different platforms that provide that. The first is Overdrive, which you may also hear referred to as Libby. Libby is the name of Overdrive's app. And Overdrive offers downloadable ebooks and downloadable audiobooks, as well as downloadable magazines now. And we also have Hoopla, and Hoopla offers downloadable ebooks, audiobooks, and also movies, music, and graphic novels. And the great thing about Hoopla is that there is never a wait. If you see a title on that platform, you can download it and start listening or reading immediately. And with us this week are, of course, myself. I'm Jennifer Graneski, and I'm the community librarian at the Dundee Branch Library. And our introductory question this week is, besides audiobooks, what is something else that you enjoy listening to? And so for me, I think probably one of my favorite sounds in the whole world is the sound of my son's laughter. And that goes from when he was a tiny little baby up until now when you start tickling him or you tell something that he thinks is funny and he starts laughing so hard that he can't stop. So I think laughter is one of the best sounds at any time, you know, whether it's a friend's laughter or a child's laughter, but particularly there's something about those itty bitty baby laughs that just can make your day. So that's mine. Also with us this week is Stephanie Winterstein, who does youth services for the Ida and Summerfield Petersburg branches, as well as the whole county now, because she does Zoom story times that you can access as well from anywhere. And what's your favorite thing to listen to, Stephanie?
Well, see, now you're going to make me feel bad because I should say something sweet about my children.
No, I already took that. So you just tell me that, you know, Jennifer said that, so I couldn't use that.
Hers is way more heartfelt than mine. My favorite thing to listen to is actually music on my headphones. I put my headphones in, I put my phone in my pocket, and I will clean the entire house. I basically tune everyone out. And I pretend they're not there. So it's almost the exact opposite of what you're saying. But that's how I get the most of my work done at home is I just headphones, pretend no one else is around. And I half the time I totally forget that people could actually be there and I start singing and annoying everyone. But I get in my own little world that way and I get a lot more done when I do it that way. So it's kind of my time to, you know, tune out and be productive. So
get the stuff done. So, you know, I don't listen to music usually when I'm cleaning house. I usually have an audiobook or a podcast going, but yes, I definitely need something to listen to get through those sort of routine things.
It helps.
Yes. And also with us today is Ashley Lyford, who is the community librarian at the Summerfield Petersburg branch. And what do you enjoy listening to, Ashley?
So I didn't think about this ahead of time, but I'd agree with Steph and say music. You know, I have a bit of a drive to work. I don't know, music just really, my brain is like always a little crazy, but music helps pull it in. I will be a little odd and say I actually also love listening to white noise. Like I will just be sitting in the living room and turn on some white noise while I, you know, read or something else. I'm very, very easily distracted. And I think just that little bit of white noise helps me like shut it down.
Nice. That's interesting. Tony has a white noise maker for when he goes to sleep. And sure. I know that helps him. I hadn't thought about doing that during the day just to kind of
Yeah, I listen to it when I sleep too, but I often turn it on during the day. There's just so much, I got dogs and other people in the house, and so just a little white noise sometimes just helps me focus.
Nice. Thanks, Ashley.
Mhm.
Also with us this week is Jody Russ, the community librarian at the Bedford branch. And what do you enjoy listening to, Jody?
Well, I would agree, music. I honestly listen to audiobooks almost all the time because I feel like I'm a junkie. I literally have one going in both apps on my phone, and I have CDs in my car, which is still, I hate listening to audiobooks on CDs now, like distracted driving. Seriously, I got to change my disc. I prefer my phone, but I always have multiple audiobooks going, and sometimes they're very similar, but other times they're very different. So depending on what it is I'm doing, I make the choice of what I'm going to listen to at this particular moment. So that's kind of cool. But music is the thing for me. I personally like turning it on the actual stereo and just cranking it up, and everybody's just going to have to listen to what I got on. That's really how it goes. But it really gets you in the right mood, right? So if I need to clean the house, Creedence Clearwater Revival kind of gets me moving, right? That's my springtime listening. The first day that it's nice enough to have your car window down and driving around, I love blasting some CCR. Elton John is always a very emotional calmer for me because he has, such a wide variety of things to listen to. But I love listening to really 70s and 80s, mostly rock music, but some easy listening to depending on my mood.
So on the day when it hit 40 here this week, did you have your windows rolled down, blasting the music? Because it was really tempting.
I was in the library all day long, so no windows down.
Rats.
Well, and I have a daughter who's stealing my vehicle all the time now, so I'm driving myself very little anywhere. I'm getting dropped off wherever I need to go. So,
so you don't get to control the music.
Yeah.
Sad.
Role reversal.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Jody. And to kick us off this week in talking about some of our favorite audiobooks is going to be me. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is a trilogy called The Magicians by Lev Grossman. And all three of these are read by Mark Bramhall. And I do want to mention that apparently this was made into a television series, and I have not seen that. So I cannot speak on that at all, whether it is like the books or completely unlike it or what. But as for the book themselves, I will say, first of all, when I first reviewed these books, and it's probably been 10 years or more, I actually said that the reader is awesome and that I wasn't sure that I would have liked the books as much without him. And he has there's something that I seem to gravitate toward men with deep, gravelly voices. I don't know if it's the leftover love for James Earl Jones, because I love his voice. But both of the readers that I talk about today both have sort of a deep, gravelly voice. And Mark Bramhall's was recognizable enough that I listened to this whole series, and then several years later, I started listening to another audiobook, and I kept listening to it going, I know that voice, I know that voice, I know that voice. But the audiobook I was listening to was completely different. It wasn't fantasy, it wasn't adventure, it was a very slow, contemplative, domestic story. So it took me a while to finally connect and go, oh, that's the guy that did The Magicians. So I think he's fabulous. And I looked him up in our library catalog, and he has narrated a lot of things in a lot of different genres. He does fiction, he does nonfiction. So if you like deep, gravelly voices, pick him. So The Magicians, this one got a bad rap, I think, when it first came out, because a lot of people were calling it Harry Potter for adults. And so people went into it thinking that they were going to get Harry Potter, and it's not Harry Potter. So it centers on Quentin Coldwater, and Quentin is a senior in high school, and he is miserable. And just so you know, Quentin remains pretty miserable through the whole series. And a lot of people couldn't get over that. Like, they were just, they expected Harry Potter, where the central character is, confused and maybe naive, but ultimately heroic. Quentin is certainly not what you would think of as a heroic character. He's depressed. He's frustrated with his life. It feels like a very stereotypical teenager, you know, but as a senior in high school, he's bright. He's not sure what he's going to do with his future. He's not terribly excited about it. And then he discovers that he has been invited to Breakbills for college. And Breakbills is a university for magic. And the magic here in this world is incredibly difficult to do. It's not something that you're just born with. You might have an affinity for it, but it's really, really hard and it's exhausting. And when you go to college for it, it's probably going to wear you out. Also, it is a typical college experience with all of the things. Well, I don't want to say typical because mine wasn't like that, Mom and Dad, but it's filled with sex and drugs and booze and all of the things that you normally think of as going along with part of that college experimentation and figuring out who you are, figuring out who your friends are. And so Quentin gets to Breakbills, and not only does he discover that magic is real, but there's a magical world as well called Fillory. And Fillory is a combination of Narnia and Wonderland and all of those other magical worlds that you probably read about in other books. And to find out that it's real with magical creatures is amazing. But Quentin also discovers that Fillory is falling apart. And so then the rest of the series kind of goes on as to how they are going to continue to get into Fillory and whether or not Fillory can be fixed. And part of that goes along with some power struggles that are going on, and maybe Fillory shouldn't be fixed. So there's a lot of ethical questions that are in the Magicians that I don't think you see as much in Harry Potter. So it is not for everybody. When I went back and looked at this title, because I remembered the reader very distinctly and how much I enjoyed him. When I went back and looked at it, 2 other librarians here in the system had also reviewed it, and they both hated it. So just be prepared that this may not be the book for everybody. If you're like, oh, I liked Harry Potter, I'll like this. It might not be. And usually what the dividing line is whether or not you can stomach Quentin, whether or not you have any empathy for him, because he is a bit of a pill throughout most of the series. So that is The Magicians by Lev Grossman. The other book that I am going to talk about is The Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill. And for those who don't know, Joe Hill is the son of Stephen King. He originally published under Joe Hill because he didn't want to have his reputation in horror be affected by his dad's reputation. And this particular title by Joe Hill is read by Stephen Lang. And I'm going to give you the description of the book first. And I'm going from the book blurb because it's been a long time since I listened to this one. So I'm going to give you the book blurb because it explains the story really well. So aging, self-absorbed rock star Judas Coyne, and I just love that name. All of Joe Hill's names, Judas Coyne. He sounds like an aging, self-absorbed rock star. Has a thing for the macabre. His collection includes sketches from infamous serial killer John Wayne Gacy, a skull from the 16th century, and a used hangman's noose. So when his assistant tells him about a ghost for sale on an online auction site, he immediately puts in a bid and he purchases it. The black heart-shaped box that Coyne receives in the mail not only contains the suit of a dead man, but also his vengeance-obsessed spirit. The ghost, it turns out, is the stepfather of a young groupie who committed suicide after the 54-year-old Coyne callously used her. Now, the ghost is determined to kill Coyne and anyone who helps him. And the merciless ghost, and I love this name, the ghost's name is Craddock McDermott. Craddock McDermott. Now think of that being said in a aging, self-absorbed rocker's voice that spent most of its life screaming and singing. Craddock McDermott, like that. It was just amazing. And so Craddock McDermott, the ghost, begins his assault on Judas Coyne's sanity. And that's the premise of the story. And I distinctly remember this one, and I chose it because I was listening to it on my ride home from work. And so it's completely dark out, you know, it's after 8 o'clock. And there's a point in the story where I remember literally gasping and going, in my car on the ride home from work. And it had to do with somebody who was walking along the side of a road at night. And here's me driving down an empty, mostly empty highway at night. And I just, the voice, my own gasping, the whole thing creeped me out. It was the perfect read for driving at night. So those are my 2 reads. I highly recommend. And Stephen Lang, I went and looked, and apparently he doesn't do as much narration as Mark Bramhall does. I looked him up, and he's done some of Joe Hill's other books, but he has a very distinct voice as well. So I feel like maybe, you know, you need those books about aging rockers for him to be the right choice. So those are my 2. And let's have Stephanie share her audiobooks next.
Okay. First of all, I'm going to preface this by saying, is there a really bad echo? Okay. Hang on. Okay, good. That's all I could hear. So my first book is called We Are Never Meeting in Real Life by Samantha Irby. The first thing I need to say about this is if you can't handle like bad words or a little bit of raunchiness, so to speak, then this isn't for you. But it's very funny, and because of that, I mean, I'm okay with some of that stuff, but it's a lot. But it's funny enough that you can probably overlook some of it if you don't mind. Just don't listen to it around kids. If you have your kids in the car or something. But anyway, We Are Never Meeting in Real Life. It's a collection of essays, and they're just funny. Some of them are very relatable, but then, you know, you're laughing one minute and then you might cry. So it's one of those, but it says, whether Samantha Irby is talking about how her difficult childhood has led to a problem in making adult budgets, explaining why she should be the new Bachelorette, and you know I love the Bachelorette, so she's 35-ish but could easily pass for 60-something, detailing a disastrous pilgrimage/romantic vacation to Nashville to scatter her estranged father's ashes, sharing awkward sexual encounters, or dispensing advice on how to navigate friendships with former drinking buddies who are now suburban moms, hanging out for Costco loot, which, I mean, I can relate to that. She's as deft as poking fun at the ghost of her past self as she is capturing powerful emotional truths. So it's just, to me, it was just really funny. It went really fast, and I liked, you know, it was one that I could listen to in the car with no children in there with me. And I really enjoy it. Like I said, it is a little bit not appropriate all the time, but you know, it's an adult audiobook. But you know, give it a try if that's something you might be interested in. The other one is Bossy Pants by Tina Fey. Personally, I just love Tina Fey. She has like a nerdy sense of humor, and I relate to that a lot because I always felt like I'm like this big nerd. So I feel kind of inspired by that. But it was great to listen to. It was a short book, but I relate to her kind of her messy life in some respects. But it just made me laugh. Now there's some swearing in this book too, but that's, you know, it didn't bother me. I think I related to, you know, she was talking about that she has too many things to juggle, and instead of, you know, I took it as, instead of complaining about, you know, how busy your life is and other things, she just like takes it with a grain of salt and just laughs about things instead of, you know, complaining. And that's kind of a good mantra, you know, life's too short, stop complaining, just make the best out of life, and you know, laugh about things. And laughter is something we try to do in our house all the time, so you know, we always try to find the bright side of things. But the little synopsis would say, let's see what it says. It says, Tina Fey was just a young girl with a dream, a reoccurring stress dream that She has been chased through a local airport by her middle school gym teacher, which I found hilarious. She also had a dream that one day she would be a comedian on TV. She has seen both of these dreams come true, from her youthful days as a vicious nerd, to her tour of duty on Saturday Night Live, from her passionately half-hearted pursuit of physical beauty to her life as a mother eating things off the floor, from her one-sided college romance to her nearly fatal honeymoon, from the beginning of this paragraph to the final sentence. It was just a very, very funny book, and if you like her on Saturday Night Live, then you will enjoy this book. So that's my 2.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm pretty sure I haven't listened to Samantha Irby, but I have looked at it because I see her reviews and I love her book covers because they're so bright. And I've read the reviews on her. I'm like, I feel like I would end up enjoying those.
I think
and I'm pretty sure I listened to Bossy Pants and enjoyed it.
It was a long, like it came out in 2011, so it's been around for a long time. And that was one that popped into my head right away because I like to read, or I should say listen to. I really love the comedian memoirs, like done by all the comedians, and I have lots of favorites, but she was one of the first ones that popped into my head. So when Jody has a long list of ones, and I was like, oh, that's a good one too. That's a good one too. Ooh, I didn't know. You'll hear more about that later, but I really like her. It was really hard between her and Amy Poehler, like together. I love them. So those are mine.
Let's write a book together, and then they could record the audiobook together because that would be awesome.
That would really be funny. They could talk about their friendship. So.
And both of yours were recorded by the author as well, because Tina actually is the narrator for hers, and then I read that Samantha was for hers as well. So
yes, I like that because I feel like when they do their own, it just has a little an added level of personal touch that is nice. So
yeah. Well, and they know their own work. The only time for audiobooks when I found like maybe the author shouldn't do it is if they aren't already a performer.
Right.
Because I have read a couple of memoirs by people who are not performers. And there was one in particular, and I won't give the title of it because I'm nice. But wow, she should not have read her own book because it was not good. Like, I won't go into it, but she was not, she had a voice, and I've been told this, but she had a voice that was difficult to listen to. And when you're listening to it for 6 to 8 hours, that's a lot to take. So, but if they're performers, then it's fabulous because they already know this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks.
And let's have Ashley share her audiobooks with us next.
So one of mine is one Steph just mentioned, Yes Please by Amy Poehler. I love Parks and Rec, which is how I started loving Amy Poehler. So the book details her like her early career when she was on SNL, and it goes in some about Parks and Rec. Oh, sorry. I can't mute myself because,
No,
I'm talking. They're going to be really loud for a second. One second.
Oh, puppy dogs.
Oh, sometimes they think they hear something and then they just go crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
They can hear you.
Yeah. So it talks about her time on SNL, which is kind of how she got started, and then it goes into more about Parks and Rec. And I cannot say enough, Parks and Rec is my favorite show. If you haven't watched it, you should watch it. Sometimes I feel like I am Leslie Knope, so you should watch it. But Amy reads this book herself, which is actually one of the reasons I liked it. This also, I'm talking about this book because it's one of the first books I listened to as an audiobook, and actually what got me hooked on audiobooks. At first, I could really only listen to biographies read by people I liked, just because I knew what I was getting, I guess. And she doesn't disappoint. She's funny. But she's very intelligent, and that comes out in her stories. There's a lot of things I laughed out loud about. And there are some special guests that she brings in to talk to. I think Seth Meyers, I know her parents did. And maybe like a bigger name would be like Carol Burnett was in it. So it's just a good, fun to listen to biography. I also like biographies because they tend to be like short chapters, just about new, like quick things. And hers was too. So if you haven't listened to her book or even just read it, you should check that one out.
I do just want to jump in here and just say, when you said the laugh out loud part, it reminded me that be really careful if you're listening to a really funny audiobook while exercising.
Oh,
because I can chug along on my treadmill, and I don't remember which book it was, but it was really funny. And then you start laughing and walking, and then I can't breathe. So I'm going, so I look like a crazy person. So, if you're going to listen to a real funny book, just beware of that if you're going to listen to it while you're exercising. Just a warning.
I thought you were going to say like you fell off your treadmill or something.
No, thankfully, no. I just couldn't breathe. I was able to, slow it down and get off before there were any issues. I just looked like a crazy person.
Nice.
Nice, yeah.
So the other book I was going to talk about is called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I actually was given this book by a friend just a couple of months ago, and it was on a book list, like the Guide to Gilmore Girl books, Gilmore Guide to Books maybe. So it was like a book that like the Gilmore Girls would have loved, which again, love that show, watched it, as a teenager, couldn't get enough. But Untamed is about, well, Glennon reads it herself, and it's about like her self-discovery, going from living like what she was programmed to live, like what the world tells you, how the world tells you to be a woman, and how your life should go, like, get a job, get married, raise a family, whatever, versus like figuring out what it is that she really wanted and how she wanted her life to look. One of the things she talks about that I found really interesting, and part of me thinks maybe I should try it, is like she has a really hard time figuring out what she truly wants. This is why this book really struck me. When she's trying to make a decision, instead of just like making a decision like a normal person, she pulls her friends, her family, she Googles it, which is exactly what I do. Like I am incapable of making a decision unless I get other people's opinions first, just to figure out what is the right decision, which makes no sense because like your decision might not be the right decision for me. So to start trying to figure out what she really wants herself, she makes herself sit in silence with herself for, at first 10 minutes, and then she like lengthens it. And to do this, she goes into her closet and just sits there. No phone, no anything, like she just sits there. And she started, at first she was, making grocery lists in her head and thinking about how stupid this is and yada, yada, yada. But eventually, like she found her like calm, quiet, like space where she could hear herself, like, and listen to herself and figure out what it is that she wants. And I just found that really interesting. Like I said, especially as a person who does exactly, like I poll people, I don't make my own decisions. A lot of times I've complained that like my whole life, just like, I just did what I was supposed to do, right? So I feel like maybe I need to start sitting on the closet floor, trying to, decide what it is that I want, not what everyone else wants. So she goes like in the beginning of the book, she is married with 3 kids, and then, but it's a very unhappy marriage. And so like the story is just like her figuring out what is right for her and how that looks. And of course it's written like after the fact. So after she's already made decisions and, her life isn't perfect and whatever, but it is very much more designed by her and what she wants. The other thing she talked about a lot is how people ask how you're doing and you automatically just say, I'm fine, right? I'm fine. She says she never will say that again. Like she is, she will never, that's just a not honest answer. So she's like taken that out of her vocabulary. She also took the word should out of her vocabulary because it like messes with us, and like that's how we make ourselves feel bad because, oh, I should have eaten a healthier dinner. I should have exercised. I should have, you know, whatever. Well, who says that you should? Like, who is telling you that? Is it yourself? Because if it's not, then get rid of that. You don't, you know, you don't need to should anything. So I just really liked it. And I thought there were a lot of things I could take from it. So that's why I chose that.
Nice. That one's got a lot of interest in it too. I have not read or listened to that one, but I know a lot of people have and have really taken good things from it.
Yeah.
Right in there. Thank you, Ashley.
Yep.
And finally, we're going to have Jody share her audiobooks with us. And we saved Jody for last because she is our audiobook aficionado. So we're going to have her share her titles, plus just some general information about fabulous audiobook readers and narrators. Go for it, Jody.
That's putting a lot of pressure on me, the
no pressure.
aficionado. But listen, I just want to show you guys like my handwritten note. Like seriously, when we went to Awesome Audiobooks, I was working in the lobby and I couldn't stop scribbling things. So this is my note. I normally have some prepared things to speak about, and I realized as we got started, I had no prepared notes, and then I kind of panicked. So while you guys were talking, I did a few notes. I just wanted to say you guys are talking about Saturday Night Live. Like when I was that age that I was watching Saturday Night Live, it was John Belushi and Chevy Chase, and like Tina Fey. Now I can't stay up that late. I don't know.
Watch it the next day.
By the time she was on there, but Bossy Pants was so fun. I love those laugh out loud audiobooks. A couple things I wanted to say first. First of all, the books that I'm talking about are mostly clean books. So if you like listening to the not clean ones, Stephanie's got a good list. If you like listening to clean ones, everything I talked about, I think you could listen to, you know, it's not going to offend anybody. And I actually have several kids books on my list here too. Audiobooks are one of the things that we as a family have listened to audiobooks when we've traveled. Not the most recent times because everybody's got their own thing that they're doing with their headphones now. But like when my kids were younger, my kids are all born 5 years apart, and so I had a 10-year-old when I had a baby, right? So what do you listen to on a family road trip that's appropriate for a 10-year-old and a baby, right? And a 5-year-old in the middle. So that was one of the things that I, excuse me, really worked at, finding things that seemed appropriate. And so that's a little bit of what I'll talk about. The other thing is audiobooks, like you have to have a good narrator. So if you've listened to an audiobook that you didn't like, don't give up on audiobooks. It's probably because the narrator wasn't appropriate for the material. And my perfect example is, I think the very first audiobook that I listened to was, because I used to listen to talk radio all the years that I drove to Wayne State. Why I did that and wasted my time with not audiobooks, I have no idea. But anyway, I listened to Scarlet, which is supposed to be the sequel to Gone with the Wind, right? And the reader, which I noticed it's not that person now. So there's a new recording of that. So this is good news. But the reader was a woman with a British accent. I mean, we're talking about Scarlett O'Hara. Who chose that person to read the book? I mean, that was just one of the things. And I thought it was almost impossible for me to listen to because it was just so wrong. And so that's what I mean. Like you might get somebody that isn't right for the book. And even if it's the author of the book, which I agree with Jennifer, there's been some things that I've listened to that I thought this doesn't really fit. But then there's other things that it wouldn't be right with anybody else reading it. Tina Fey being one of those, Trevor Noah being a perfect example. Like you really, you know, sometimes that person reading it, when you hear it as they intended it, when they wrote it, really adds a lot to it. And so I can't say enough about audiobooks, which is why they stuck me last, because I really, you're going to have to put the hook in me and pull me off. So, okay, so the first one that I had on my list was a series, The #1 Ladies Detective Agency by Alexander McCall Smith. And these are like lovely, easy to listen to mysteries. There's a whole bunch of them, as you can see on the screen. They're read by, Alexander McCall Smith wrote them. He has several different series that he's written. So there's some Scottish detectives, and those are good readers too. But this particular one, Lisette Lacat reads this. I don't know if I'm saying that right, probably not. But she is from South Africa, and her ability to read these with an authentic accent really helps transport you to the locations. The books themselves are about a female detective in Botswana who drives her little white van all over to help solve mysteries. And it tells you as much about life in Botswana, the kind of foods that they eat, you know, the fact that they're drinking the red tea all the time. They drink hot tea even though it's hot out, because that helps cool them down, apparently, is how she says it in a really easy to understand way. But they talk about finding shade under a tree when they need to, and they take, you know, siestas at the right time of day because it's too hot to be out and about. And she said something at one point, she'd traveled somewhere else, and she said something about the pale sun. It's just not like the sun in Botswana. Like, the sun is really vivid as opposed to our pale northern skies, right?
Sad Michigan sun, but I'll take sad Michigan sun over no Michigan sun.
Absolutely, absolutely. So anyway, you know, that entire series just really fun and easy to listen to and light, and that I find them entertaining and a great break when you need a great break. So the other single title that I put on there, and I just picked this one not only because I think it's a great book, but also because I thought the narrator was perfect for it, was Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee, which is kind of the continuing story of To Kill a Mockingbird. So To Kill a Mockingbird is read by Cicely Tyson, which is awesome to listen to, and she's perfect for that voice. Go Set a Watchman is when Scout Jean Louise comes back to Macomb, Alabama after she's been away at college. And it's read by Reese Witherspoon. And so this is a case of, you know, somebody who's a famous actress reading a book. But if you didn't realize it was by Reese Witherspoon, you probably wouldn't even know that it was her. But her slightly Southern, very soft, you know, she does a really good young adult sounding narration to the story that I think is a great companion to the kind of story that Harper Lee was trying to get across. So it really was an addition to that. So beyond that, I have a huge, and Jennifer was nice enough to make a second slide with all of the other people that I felt it's so important to talk about. So I'll start with some of the kids narrators that I absolutely love listening to. I'm not kidding when I say I search by narrator. When I'm looking for an audiobook, not that there aren't titles that I want to listen to and I'll look for that title, but I will search by narrator and I'll listen to anything and everything that narrator reads because I just love listening to him so much. So that's one of Jim Dale being one of the first people because he reads the Harry Potter series. And so Jennifer, I think, mentioned people being trained in various things. An awful lot of these narrators that are narrators professionally were trained at drama schools in the first place, and their first jobs were actually acting in various capacities. And then they've turned to audiobooks. I think some of them probably make more money reading audiobooks than they ever did acting. So that's kind of interesting too. But Jim Dale's won all kinds of awards for his acting, which I didn't even, he's in Pete's Dragon, for crying out loud. I didn't even know that.
I did not know that either. All I know him from is audiobooks, and particularly Harry Potter.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, he reads the whole Harry Potter series, but he also reads those Peter and the Starcatcher series, which is the story of Peter Pan. So he reads all of those too, and all of those, obviously, they're juvenile books. Peter and the Starcatchers, some of those get a little darkish, scary, kind of like for young children, but I would think even by the time kids are, you know, I mean, they hear the story of Peter Pan when they're really young, right? So they know that Captain Cook's a bad guy coming after him, right? So I think, you know, by the time they're all juveniles anyway. Tim Curry, which I actually mentioned another time that I was doing this program with you guys. Series of Unfortunate Events is read by Tim Curry, and he's just marvelous. I was just telling one of my coworkers about it the other day. There's this character in there called Mr. Poe, who is the guardian of the Baudelaire children after their parents have passed away. He's the banker who keeps track of their money. And in the book, they talk about how he's always got this cough and everybody has to sit and wait while Mr. Poe coughs in his handkerchief, you know. So Tim Curry's coughing and he's like, you know, he's like, it's just so fantastic, you know, you just like really, I mean, I'm a fan of his anyway, because when I was a teenager, I used to sneak into the midnight movies to watch Rocky Horror Picture Show. So Tim Curry fan from long, long ago. Trevor Noah's on there. He reads his own book called Born a Crime, which, wow, is not only a very moving book, but the way that he tells that story of him growing up in South Africa and apartheid and all of the race relation issues in South Africa compared to what he knows now living in America. Really, really an interesting and moving story, but done it in Trevor Noah fashion. So definitely add something to that. Another great, and my daughter's reading that for her AP English, high school English class, which I find interesting too. Tale of Despereaux by Kate DiCamillo is also a great one to listen to with kids. That's one of the ones I remember listening to when we traveled. I don't know where we went, Gettysburg maybe we traveled to, and all the kids were okay listening to it. So that was kind of cool. Two more that were read by the author. Oh, I already mentioned Trevor Noah and you mentioned Bossy Pants, but Carrie Fisher's books, fantastic. Carrie Fisher will make you laugh out loud at some of the most tragic events. I mean, it's unfortunate that, you know, she's talking about a lot of things that went wrong in her life throughout the books, but in such a funny way. So I really enjoy listening to her as well. But then I'm going to move on to my two. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said I second Carrie Fisher. I've listened to like everything she's written, and she's amazing.
Yeah, she's really, really funny.
Mm-hmm.
Simon Vance is one of the British narrators. Like you can't, I mean, really for me, you can't go wrong listening to some guy with a lovely British accent talking to me in my ears when I have my earbuds in. So, but I just listened to Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which is, you know, Viktor Frankl was in the concentration camps, 3 different concentration camps during World War II, and then he's a famous psychologist. And so has this book that Simon Vance reads called Man's Search for Meaning, really, really great to listen to. And then Simon Preble's my absolute all-time favorite. And Simon Preble, this is a perfect example. He trained at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London. He started his career in one of Britain's first live soap operas. He was also in As the World Turns for one season back in 1996 as the villain Martin Chedwin. And he narrates many different mostly British detective series, a few of which I may have mentioned before. Peter Lovesey is one of the authors, and he has the Peter Diamond detective series, which Peter Diamond's a police detective in Bath, England. So that's kind of cool because it brings in some of the history of Bath, which I think is, not that I've ever been there, but you know, my mom has, so I've seen pictures. Dick Francis, which are horse racing mysteries, which is kind of funny because my grandmother used to read Dick Francis. That's how long those have been around. But now Dick Francis's son is writing those kind of things, and they still seem relevant. It's not like they're old-fashioned or out of date. Charles Todd, which I know I've mentioned multiple times. Simon Preble reads the Ian Rutledge detective series, which is set World War I, just as World War I is ending in England. And then he also reads Lindsay Davis's Marcus Didius Falco series, which is in ancient Egypt during the time of Titus Caesar. So those are kind of interesting too. But he also does a lot of classics. That's one of the things I find is many of these people that narrate books, like that's what they do is narrate books. You can also find classics that they've done. So he did 1984, The Island of Dr. Moreau and The Time Machine. Those are all Simon Preble things that he reads. So I don't know, I think I covered my whole list. Felt like I was going to say a whole lot more than that. But audiobooks, honestly, I don't think you can go wrong. It's a great, I find myself not able to do things I have to focus on if I don't have a book going, which says something maybe about, like you said, Ashley, I can't imagine sitting in a closet with my own thoughts for 30 seconds, let alone 10 minutes. I'm not sure I would be able to pull that off, but I do understand what she's saying. You really have to learn to quiet your mind, but I feel like the audiobooks do that for me, right? Maybe that's partly why I like listening to fairly nice, clean stories too, though, you know. Let's keep my mind as calm as possible. So, but I listen to a lot of nonfiction that way too, and sometimes like reading nonfiction can seem a little too tedious. Listening to nonfiction though, I find really interesting. I'm listening to Rachel Maddow's Blowout right now, which is about the natural gas and oil industry. Really fascinating stuff that I had no idea about. So it's really cool to be able to help yourself learn about new things too that you maybe wouldn't be able to pick up that book and read. You know, I do a lot of nonfiction that way as well. So thanks for giving me all that time.
No problem. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I agree on nonfiction. I am not a natural nonfiction reader, but for book club, we almost always have one or two, sometimes more than that every year. And I'm always sort of like anxious about it. And then I listened to one of them at some point, probably 10 years or more ago, and found it so enjoyable. Like it was just, and I listened to a lot of NPR. So that wasn't unusual for me to be taking information in through audio.
Right.
So listening to a nonfiction book I found was so much better for me than actually sitting there and reading it. So I definitely second that. You know, a topic that you might be like, like for me, one of them was The Worst Hard Time, which is about the Dust Bowl. Okay. And it's a fabulous book, but I feel like if I had sat down to read it as a book, I would have really struggled. But listening to it, it was wonderful. Also, anything that they do as an audio drama, you know, if you're doing Shakespeare as a former English teacher, if you're doing Shakespeare or anything like that, listening to it is almost better, particularly for a beginner, than reading it. You know, seeing a performance is great, but listening to it is amazing too. I
actually forgot to mention that, so I'm glad you brought that up because I actually just listened to, you guys aren't going to believe this, but I never had read the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I'm not really a fantasy, you know, it's not really my thing. I read The Hobbit, but I never read the trilogy, right? So I just listened to that, and I got to be honest and say I'm not sure that was through one of the library's resources. It might have been freebies I got on Audible, so I will, you know, fess up that maybe that's how I did it. But they were a full cast reading, and I'm not kidding you. It was like listening to the movies, like you heard the battles going on, like it was a full cast production, and it was really, really interesting to listen to that way. And I don't, just because of the length of those books and the fact that it's not really my thing to read, I feel like listening to it was the only way I could get through it. But I didn't realize I was going to enjoy it so much because they did it that way as a full cast thing. And an awful lot of Shakespeare is done that way. There's a lot of things that are full cast. You can actually search for that if you're looking for audiobooks too, if you want to listen to full cast things.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. This has been fun. And now I have more titles and narrators now to look for on my list, because I've probably heard Simon Preble because I've listened to some of the series that you talked about, and I'm like, oh, well, now I'll just go and search for him, because I just finished a series that I've been listening to on Hoopla. So it's time for me to find my next series to listen to. So now I have an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for those who listened. And next week we are going to be talking, next week we're going to be talking about disasters and dystopias, because March is pretty close to the 1-year anniversary when our world shut down last year. So we're going to talk about disasters and dystopias and thinking about that and how our world has changed in the last year. So we'll see you next week, and I hope you have a good one. And puppies. Bye, everybody. Bye.